She walked out the door wearing the same perfume I bought her for our anniversary last year. The door didn't slam. It clicked, almost politely, like the kind of courtesy you extend to a stranger in an elevator. That was the last sound I heard before silence swallowed the house whole. On the table sat her lemon cake, from that overpriced bakery all the way across town. She used to joke it was her birthday religion. I'd stood in line for 40 minutes. Wrapped next to it, a small gift. A gold pen with her name engraved, something elegant and personal, something that said I still paid attention. I'd gotten off work early, cleared my schedule, even wore the shirt she once said made me look less like a guy who forgot how to live. Little details, the kind you think will matter when someone loves you back. Instead, I got, "Oh, I'm going with Mark from work. We made plans weeks ago," like I was a pothole on her calendar. I asked, calmly, "You're celebrating your birthday with him?" And she just shrugged. "You said you were busy lately anyway." That's when it hit me it wasn't a slip. Not an accident. Not poor timing. It was a choice. A deliberate, dismissive choice. And not the first. Just the one that finally echoed loud enough. While she was off playing professional soulmates with Mark the helpful coworker, I sat at the dining table staring at her cake. The candles remained in their package. I didn't touch a slice. Something about eating it felt grotesque. Like stealing crumbs from a party I wasn't invited to. I didn't drink. Didn't rage. Didn't text her. I opened my calendar app and quietly deleted a recurring reminder I'd set a year ago titled, "Anniversary Trip Ideas." It felt surgical. Precise. Like turning off a machine you knew wouldn't restart. Then I backed up a few old photos from my phone. Just the ones I liked. Not of us, just of me. If you're still here listening to this, I'll ask just once. Subscribe. Takes a second, but more than 97% of people who hear these stories never hit that button. And weirdly enough, it tells us the work matters. That people care. So if you do, tap that. It helps the team keep going. Anyway, when Danielle came home around midnight, the only light on was from the fridge. I was in bed, eyes open, pretending to sleep. She didn't smell like wine. She smelled like something worse, emotional adrenaline. That high you get from being chosen, wanted, seen. Probably the way I used to make her feel. Back when she wanted me to. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. And that was the most honest conversation we'd had in months. The next morning, she kissed the top of my head like everything was fine. Like I was furniture. I said nothing. Watched her pour coffee. Laugh at something on her phone. No explanation. No apology. Just that smug post-birthday glow. It wasn't the first time she'd chosen someone else. But it was the first time I realized she was done hiding it. She came home from work humming. That alone told me everything. Danielle only hummed when she felt in control. After a good presentation, a flirtatious meeting, or when she'd won a fight without me even knowing it happened. That morning wasn't any different. She breezed past me in the kitchen, hair still slightly damp from her post-gym rinse, tapping away at her phone like the screen held her next dopamine hit. I poured her coffee, set it down in her usual mug, white with a tiny crack near the handle, the one she weirdly preferred over the newer ones. She didn't even look up, just grabbed it, mumbled a half-hearted, "Thanks," and sat by the window, grinning at whatever Mark from work had sent. I didn't say a word, and that silence, it wasn't the passive kind. It was the loaded kind, the kind that starts building scaffolding behind your ribs. I wanted to ask, how was the filet mignon with your coworker? Did he order the wine or did you? But I didn't, because I didn't need answers anymore. I needed detachment, so I went looking for it. That weekend, she was off running errands, or so she said. I didn't ask where, didn't pretend to care. I waited until her car backed out of the driveway and the garage door rolled shut with a slow mechanical groan. Then I went upstairs and opened the hallway closet. It's funny what gets buried over the years. Old sweaters I never wore, books I meant to read, a journal I'd started in 2014 and abandoned 2 months later. I took them out piece by piece, wiped the dust off and packed them into neat, labeled boxes. Not in any rush, not like I was running, more like I was curating a museum of a man who used to live here. When she came home and saw the boxes stacked by the stairs, her eyes narrowed just enough to register discomfort. "What's all this?" she asked, arms full of grocery bags. I smiled politely. "Just organizing. Haven't touched that closet in years." She stared for a beat too long. Her eyes flicked from the boxes to my face. I could see it, the gears turning but never fully connecting. That would require her to believe I was capable of something more than sulking. That maybe, just maybe, I'd stopped being the man who always waited around for her to remember he existed. "Oh," she finally said. "Spring cleaning, I guess?" "It's October," I replied, still smiling. She laughed. But it was brittle, like old paper. Later that night, I noticed she had her phone flipped over on the table. A new habit, subtle but loud in its own way. She laughed at something on TV. I didn't ask what. I folded laundry on the couch. Every t-shirt, every pair of socks, folded with precision like I was preparing for inspection. Like I was preparing for goodbye. She didn't notice when I stopped asking how her day was. She didn't notice when I unsubscribed from our shared Spotify account. She didn't notice that I'd moved my spare set of keys from the bowl near the door into my drawer. She just kept scrolling, kept laughing at private little messages she didn't think I could see. I started waking up earlier. Not for her. For myself. Went on longer walks. Ate breakfast in silence. Sometimes I'd sit in my car, engine off, just listening to the stillness before heading to work. The house felt quieter, heavier, like it was tipping. And through it all, she never asked if I was okay. She never noticed that the man next to her was slipping through the cracks she kept pretending weren't there. Because to notice would mean acknowledging what she'd done. And denial is much easier to manage when the other person keeps pretending too. But I wasn't pretending anymore. I was preparing. It was tucked behind a half-used sheet of stamps and an expired Sephora coupon. A small white envelope, plain except for her name, written in that slightly slanted print Evan always used when he was trying to be neat. Not the rush scribble he used on shopping lists or post-it notes. This was his card handwriting, the kind reserved for special moments, anniversaries, or the occasional just because. Danielle stood there staring at it like it was a stray tooth. Something that belonged to a body long gone. She didn't open it. She held it between two fingers like it might smudge her, turned it over once, then slipped it back where she found it. Maybe she didn't want to know what it said. Maybe she already did. The next morning, I left before sunrise. No goodbye. Just the quiet roll of my suitcase wheels down the driveway and the soft clink of my car door closing. I'd booked a 2-night stay at a small lakeside motel up north, the kind of place with zero cell signal and a breakfast room that smelled like burnt coffee and resignation. I didn't go there to find myself. I wasn't having some spiritual retreat or writing a journal with raw, poetic introspection. I went to think, to be surrounded by something other than her perfume lingering on every towel and the faint outline of her wine glass on the nightstand. I needed cold air and silence not filled by her passive-aggressive sighs. The motel had a rusted vending machine in the hallway and no working cable. Perfect. While I sat by the lake with a thermos of terrible motel coffee, Danielle was probably thumbing through brunch menus with her thumb hovering over Mark's name in her favorites list. Or maybe not. Maybe she was staring into that drawer again, wondering if the envelope was a trap. Or worse, confirmation. Back home, my toothbrush was still in the cup. My socks still in the drawer. But I'd removed 3 pairs of shoes and left the empty slots behind like missing teeth. She didn't call. Neither did I. Danielle did eventually open her drawer again that evening. I know because she later admitted to it, though not all at once. Just in fragments. The envelope had started bothering her, she said. Like it was humming. She picked it up again. Then back down. Walked away. Came back. Then finally slit the edge open with her nail. She expected sarcasm. Or maybe an apology. Something that would give her a reason to roll her eyes and toss it in the trash. But it was just a card. On the front, a watercolor sketch of a tree in winter. Bare branches. Stark sky. Nothing sentimental. Inside, a short message in blue ink. I know I'm not perfect, but I always showed up. I chose you every time. I hope your evening was everything you wanted. Nothing else. No signature. No dramatic closure. Just truth. She didn't tell me she read it. Not right away. But her behavior changed. Not in the way people change when they're sorry. In the way people shift when they realize they missed something. She started cleaning the kitchen a little more thoroughly. Folded the laundry. Even cooked dinner one night, grilled chicken and mashed potatoes, which was my comfort food. Not hers. I ate it. But I didn't comment. I didn't hug her after. Didn't ask her about work. Just thanked her politely, like a guest. She tried to smile but couldn't hold it. Because now the silence was mutual. And somewhere in that silence, the truth echoed. I had already grieved her absence. Long before she realized I'd even left. 2 weeks slid by, awkward and stretched too thin. We slept in the same bed, but only because the mattress was wide enough to pretend we didn't. She spoke less. I responded less. The house, once filled with small talk and shallow jokes, now sounded like a church after the choir packs up. Echoes and dust. Then came the suggestion. She knocked on my office door like she was visiting someone else. Not her husband. Her voice was lighter than usual. Careful. Hey, I was thinking, she began, leaning on the doorframe like she wasn't trying too hard. Maybe we grab dinner this week? It's been a while. Feels like we haven't talked. I looked up from my laptop, took a beat, then said evenly, can't. I've got plans. The pause after that was delicious. Plans? She repeated. I nodded, not offering more. She blinked a few times, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. Eventually, she gave a stiff smile, mumbled something like, okay, another time, and walked away with her phone clutched tighter than usual. That night, she must have been scrolling, Instagram, Facebook, whatever she used to monitor the world she pretended not to care about. I heard the inhale from the hallway, sharp, like she'd just been punched in the chest with a cold wind. Because there I was, tagged in a photo I hadn't posted. Evan Wells, standing next to a real estate agent and a couple who looked like they'd just signed a contract and won a raffle. I was dressed sharp, pressed button down, new watch, the one gift I ever bought for myself. The caption read, finalizing cabin handover today. Excited for this new chapter. Congratulations, Evan. And just like that, one word sucker punched her, cabin. She didn't ask me about it the next morning. But she did open her laptop the second I left the kitchen, probably searching Zillow listings, recent sales, public records, trying to figure out where I'd been, what I'd bought, what I'd done without her. I could feel it in her eyes when I got home later, like she was trying to match the man in the photo with the man folding laundry in front of her. They didn't match anymore, and the thing that rattled her wasn't the purchase. It was the finality of it. Finalizing cabin handover. Not browsing. Not dreaming. I hadn't come to her with floor plans or asked if she preferred lakeside or forest views. I'd made a move, a big one, and didn't need her permission or interest. The next evening, I caught her trying to casually bring it up over dishes. So, thinking about moving somewhere? She asked, eyes not meeting mine. I wiped a plate and shrugged. Just needed space. That's a big step, though. Not really, I said. It's just clarity. She laughed, awkward and thin. Well, if you ever want help decorating, I'm pretty good at rustic modern. Her voice faltered at the word help. I smiled. Don't worry. The agent recommended someone. There it was. That half-second of cracked confidence behind her smirk. Like a hairline fracture in glass. You don't notice it until the pressure starts building. And oh, it was building. She didn't understand the difference yet between space and separation. But she was beginning to feel it. The warmth of being needed had vanished, and in its place, cold independence. It's strange how someone can be so terrified by your absence. Only after you've stopped asking them to notice you were there. Danielle used to be the only woman in my life who mattered. Now she was just another person wondering when I'd started smiling again, and why it had nothing to do with her. She waited until breakfast, probably rehearsed it a dozen times while lying awake, staring at the ceiling fan like it might spell out the answers for her. But when she finally opened her mouth, she still came in sideways, as if couching the question in sarcasm would blunt its edge. So, what's this about a cabin? She said, not looking up from her coffee. I stirred my oatmeal, took a sip of water, then looked at her with the kind of calm that makes people uneasy. Not because it's fake, but because it isn't. Just something I've been working on. She blinked. Since when? A while. She snorted. Not a laugh, more like a defense mechanism. Seriously, Evan? This some kind of midlife crisis? I tilted my head, smiled without warmth. No, it's clarity. She rolled her eyes and leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. So what, you're buying cabins now? Running off to the woods like some kind of reclusive monk? If that's what makes you feel better about it. You're not actually leaving. It wasn't a question. It was a dare. I set my spoon down, looked her dead in the eyes. You already left. I just followed through. That stopped her. Not because she didn't expect me to say it, but because she didn't expect me to mean it. Danielle had always lived in a world where my loyalty was permanent. Where no matter how distant she got, how many times she picked everyone else over me, I'd still be standing at the door holding her keys and asking if she wanted takeout. She thought this was another sulk. A mood. A test she could ace by pretending she didn't care long enough. Instead, she stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years, and realizing she didn't recognize the man across from her. "Wow," she said finally, tone clipped. "So dramatic." I just shrugged. "You said that the last time, when you chose your coworker over dinner with me on your birthday." Her face flinched just slightly, but I caught it. She wasn't used to me holding receipts. "Are you trying to punish me or something?" "No," I said, standing up and placing my bowl in the sink. "I'm not that creative." She followed me, a few steps behind, arms still crossed. "So what? You're just gonna disappear? Pretend none of this ever mattered?" "I didn't say that." "Then what are you saying, Evan?" I turned and met her stare again. "I'm saying I'm done making noise no one listens to." And with that I walked past her. No raised voice, no mic drop, just the sound of slippers on tile and a man who didn't need to be heard anymore. Later that day, I let her call go to voicemail. Then the next one. Then the text. "Are we really doing this?" She didn't get a reply. She called again, twice, before finally leaving a message that started strong and crumbled halfway through. "I just think, if you're going through something, we should talk. I mean, don't you think you owe me that much?" No, Danielle. I didn't owe her the conversation she refused to have when it mattered. I didn't owe her the dinner she gave to someone else. I didn't owe her closure, when I'd spent years handing her open doors. I sat outside that evening, legs kicked up on a cooler, watching the sky turn orange and purple in slow motion. The air smelled like pine and clean escape. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. Especially not the woman who taught me what it feels like to be invisible, and still assumed I'd orbit her forever. Danielle had made her choice. All I did was confirm it. The envelope wasn't hidden. It wasn't slipped under the door or tucked discreetly in the mailbox. It was taped right in the center of the doorframe, crooked, flapping slightly in the breeze like a flag of surrender. Or maybe a warning. Danielle saw it the moment she pulled into the driveway. Her heels clicked fast across the pavement as she walked up, eyebrows already drawn together in annoyance. She assumed it was a package notification, maybe a missed delivery. Something trivial, inconvenient. She tugged the envelope free, ripped it open without ceremony, and stopped cold. It was from the landlord. Not a mistake. Not a bill. A notice of lease termination. Her name was at the top. And only her name. The letter confirmed that Evan Wells had requested to be removed from the lease agreement, effective 2 weeks from the date signed, which, she quickly noticed, had already passed. She read it 3 times, as if a fourth would make the words real. Evan was gone. Legally gone. She dropped her purse. It hit the tile in the foyer with a thud. She didn't bother picking it up. Instead, she moved through the house like someone walking through the ruins of their own life. Each room suddenly felt different. Not smaller, emptier. Not because the furniture had changed, but because the presence that made it feel like home had been surgically removed. She reached for her phone with shaky fingers and called him. No answer. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. Then again, just to hear that familiar voice say, "Leave a message. Evan, can you call me back, please? I just got home and there's something from the landlord. I don't understand what's going on." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, and that's when it hit her. She wasn't confused. She did understand. She just didn't want to believe it. The next hour unraveled in a blur. She called the landlord's office, got put on hold. Eventually a receptionist, cheerful, oblivious, confirmed it. "Yes, we processed the form Evan sent over last month. Everything's been updated. You're the sole leaseholder now. Rent is due on the 1st. Utilities are under your name as of last week. Let us know if there's anything else you need." There was. She needed to scream. She hung up without responding. Stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by things that used to be theirs. Now they were hers. Her rent, her bills, her responsibilities. She went to the cabinet and opened the folder where Evan used to keep documents, insurance, taxes, renewal notices. Empty, neatly organized, and completely wiped clean. His name was being erased with surgical precision. No drama, no fights, just quiet removal. A ghost unclipping his own shadow from the wall. She sank into the chair by the kitchen island, the one Evan always leaned against when sipping his morning coffee, and realized for the first time that the silence wasn't passive anymore. It was designed. Every unopened envelope, every unanswered call, every legal form and power company account change, he wasn't pulling away. He'd already left. Danielle thought she was the one with the upper hand. The one who'd gotten bored, checked out, flirted with other options while assuming Evan would just keep orbiting her gravitational pull out of habit or weakness. She never saw him charting an escape route beneath her nose. Now the lease was hers. The bills were hers. The silence was hers. And the house, for the first time in their marriage, belonged entirely to her. Except it didn't feel like a victory. Felt like punishment. The cruelest part? He hadn't screamed. Hadn't slammed a door. Hadn't left a note on the fridge. He just deleted himself, piece by piece, until all she had left were blank forms and unanswered rings. She called Aaron like it was a business transaction. Polite tone, slow pace, as if pretending everything was normal would conjure up the version of Evan that used to laugh at family cookouts and still believed in birthday surprises. Danielle hadn't spoken to his sister in months, maybe longer, but now, with unanswered calls and legal trails cold, she was scraping at any door that might still crack open. "Hey, Aaron," she said, a bit too brightly when the line connected. "I was just wondering if you've heard from Evan." Silence. Then, "Yeah." Danielle waited, expecting more. None came. "So, has he said anything to you about what's going on? With the house? With us?" "He doesn't owe me explanations," Aaron said. Clipped. "But he didn't need to. I saw enough." Danielle's face flushed hot. She didn't like being on the back foot, especially not with Aaron, who'd always had that older sister energy. Guarded, measured, loyal to a fault. The kind of woman who didn't speak often but made every sentence count. "I just think this whole thing's gotten blown out of proportion," Danielle said quickly, trying to steer. "It was dinner. With a coworker. That's all." Aaron's voice was low, firm. "No, it wasn't." Danielle blinked. "Excuse me? You made it more than that. You made a choice," she replied. "He warned you, Danielle. Quietly, gently, over and over. And you looked away every time." Danielle's stomach churned. "I didn't mean to hurt him. That's the problem. You didn't mean anything. Not enough to matter." Click. Aaron ended the call without a goodbye. Danielle sat frozen on the couch, phone resting in her lap like a brick. The room around her felt suddenly off balance. Too quiet. Too still. She walked to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, closed it, poured a glass of water and didn't drink it. Her heart was pounding in that weird, uneven way it sometimes did after an argument. But there hadn't been one. Just a truth delivered with surgical precision. She drifted upstairs, not fully aware of her feet, opened the bedroom drawer. The card was still there. The one she'd read once and never looked at again. She had left it face down, like it might wilt under her gaze. But now she pulled it out, held it, opened it slowly. The paper crackled. She stared at the words again, but this time, she heard them. "If I'm not worth your evening, I'm not worth your future." She'd skimmed past it the first time, brushed it off as guilt-tripping or dramatics. But now it read like a prophecy. A quiet line drawn in the sand by a man who'd been trying to find his place in a life that kept closing the door on him. Danielle sank onto the bed and let the card rest in her lap. Was it really just a birthday dinner? Just one night? No. It was years of small dismissals stacked like bricks. Years of picking other people's feelings over his. Of scoffing when he planned things. Of laughing when he offered help. Of always assuming he'd be there until he wasn't. Everyone saw it but her. Aaron. The landlord. Probably the real estate agent. Maybe even Mark from work, who probably didn't even know he'd become a catalyst in someone else's unraveling. And now, Danielle sat in a house that felt too big, with bills in her name and a silence that stretched from the living room to the walls of her chest. He had been kind. He had been patient. He had been clear. And she had been loud in her neglect, deaf in her pride. Danielle set the card down gently. The line had been drawn, and she had crossed it, thinking it was just a pencil mark. It was the dog that did it. Not Evan's flannel jacket, or the way he stood by the lake with a relaxed posture she didn't recognize. Not even the soft fire glow behind the screen door of the cabin in the background. It was the dog. An old golden retriever with its tongue hanging out, pressed gently against Evan's leg. His hand rested naturally on the dog's back, like it had been there 1,000 times before. Like this wasn't a retreat. It was a life. Danielle stared at the photo for over an hour. Zoomed in, Zoomed out, checked the tag. No location, no caption. Just one comment beneath it, left by someone she didn't know. So happy you're finally settled. You deserve peace. Peace. She tried to picture him using that word a year ago. Evan didn't talk about emotions like that. He wasn't the type to chase serenity. He chased stability, routine, loyalty, her. But the man in the photo wasn't chasing anything anymore. He'd already caught it. Danielle packed a bag without planning. Jeans, sweater, flats. Nothing dressy. She didn't know what she was doing, only that she had to see whatever it was he had built without her. She wasn't even sure what she'd say. She rehearsed a dozen lines in the car as the city faded behind her. I didn't realize how bad it got. I never stopped loving you. I thought you'd come back. Every one of them sounded weaker the longer she drove. It was almost dusk when the road curved into pine country. Long stretches of trees swallowing the sun in jagged shadows. Her GPS signal dropped, but she kept going. She didn't need directions anymore. She followed the unpaved roads by instinct and the scrap of information she had managed to piece together from the real estate agent's online trail and one stray Facebook comment. And then, finally, the clearing. It was like stepping into a painting. The cabin sat tucked into a slope of trees, its wood exterior warm with the golden hue of the sinking sun. A stack of chopped firewood sat neatly under a side awning. Wind chimes clinked gently. A curl of smoke drifted from the chimney. And there, through the large window, she saw the fire. It wasn't staged. It wasn't romantic. It was just alive, simple, real. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't knocked yet and already regretted the trip. But she stepped forward anyway, gravel crunching underfoot, palms sweating. The door opened before she could raise her hand. Not Evan. A woman, maybe mid-30s, dark hair tied in a low braid, soft eyes. Not stunning, but radiant in a way that made Danielle feel like a reflection under fluorescent lights. She smiled. Calm. Friendly. Not suspicious. Just curious. Can I help you? Danielle stood there for a beat too long. Her voice caught in her throat. I'm looking for Evan. The woman tilted her head slightly. He's inside. Are you? She paused, something flickering in her expression. Danielle. The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. Danielle's mouth opened, then shut. Yes. The woman nodded slowly. He said you might come one day. That wasn't a welcome. That was a confirmation. A quiet acknowledgement that Evan had already accounted for this moment. That she wasn't unexpected. She was overdue. Danielle swallowed. Is he okay? He's good, the woman said, and the way she said it didn't feel performative. Felt true. Danielle looked past her, toward the warm light of the cabin. The dog barked once somewhere inside. I needed to see. The woman nodded again. Of course. Come in. But Danielle didn't move. Her feet stayed planted at the threshold of something irreversible. Because in that one moment, she realized something far heavier than jealousy. This wasn't a vacation spot. It wasn't an escape hatch or some emotional tantrum made manifest in wood and solitude. This was home. She could smell it in the cedar air. Feel it in the way the porch creaked under feet that were no longer running. See it in the calm of the woman who didn't need to prove anything. She wasn't Danielle's replacement. She was Evan's piece. And Danielle was just a ghost from a past that had finally stopped begging to be remembered. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame like it might keep her from unraveling. The woman, his woman, the one who opened the door without a flicker of concern, walked ahead casually, as if Danielle were just a late guest arriving for wine and conversation. No awkward glances, no apology, just calm, practiced hospitality. Danielle stepped inside, heartbeat loud in her ears. The cabin was warm, not just from the fire, but from life. Blankets draped over the back of a worn leather couch. A bowl of fruit on the counter, not for show, but with half a banana missing and an apple in someone's handprint. Someone lived here, not hiding, not mourning, thriving. And then she saw him. Evan sat at a rustic wooden table in the center of the open space. His posture was relaxed, one arm draped casually over the back of his chair. He was laughing mid-story, a soft laugh that reached his eyes. He looked younger, or maybe just lighter, as if he'd stepped out of something that had been weighing him down for years. Beside him sat the woman. Across from them, a middle-aged couple, neighbors maybe, sipping wine and sharing a plate of something roasted and golden. A dog rested at Evan's feet, tail thumping once, acknowledging Danielle's presence before returning to sleep. Evan saw her. His eyes met hers instantly, but he didn't stand, didn't flinch, didn't even stop smiling. He acknowledged her with the faintest nod, then turned back to the conversation for a moment, finishing a sentence. The woman next to him, noticing the shift in air, gently touched his hand and leaned in. "Is this the one?" she asked, voice calm. Not cruel, just curious. Evan's eyes didn't leave Danielle's. He didn't sigh, didn't smirk. He just answered, "Yes, the one who chose work dinners." Danielle's mouth parted, but no sound came out. The words hit her like a low-frequency shockwave. Not loud, not violent, but total. A humiliation not born from yelling or rage, but from being calmly, irrevocably placed. Labeled, identified, categorized. She wasn't the woman he missed. She was the lesson he learned. Danielle wanted to say something, anything, but what was left to say? That it wasn't like that? That she didn't mean to? It was like that, and she did mean to. Maybe not with malice, but certainly with ease. The table in front of him was set with care. Cloth napkins, mismatched but intentional dishes, wine glasses with fingerprints and watermarks. There was bread in a woven basket and someone had lit a candle. Not for mood, but because someone always lit candles here. Danielle used to hate candles, said they smelled fake and gave her headaches. Now one glowed between Evan and his peace. She took a step forward, but stopped when the woman beside him placed her hand gently on Evan's shoulder. He glanced at her softly like a reflex, and in that one small motion, Danielle saw everything she had never let him have. Comfort, safety, presence. No games, no half-listening, no eyes drifting toward a phone screen, just a hand, and someone who noticed when he needed it. Danielle felt her chest tighten, but not with anger, with something colder. She wasn't being replaced. She had been removed. No accusations, no courtroom drama, just a silent, slow subtraction until there was nothing left to fight for. Evan looked back at her one final time. Not cold, not cruel, just finished. Danielle stepped back. The woman reached for the wine, refilling glasses as the conversation continued. The dog never moved, and Danielle, for the first time in her life, truly understood what it meant to be uninvited from a world that once had her name on the deed. The others filtered out onto the porch with slow, familiar movements, the kind of ease people have when they belong somewhere. The woman gathered the plates with a quick apology for the mess. The neighbors laughed softly about something trivial, and the dog followed them halfway before circling back to Evan's feet. Danielle stayed where she stood. She could hear the faint hum of cicadas, the clink of glasses being set down outside, the wind tugging gently at the trees around the cabin. Everything about the place whispered this is a life. Not a performance. Not a rebound. A real, breathing life. One she hadn't been invited to. Evan stood slowly, stretching just slightly, as if to signal that dinner was done. So was the conversation. He walked over to the wood stove and nudged it closed, embers cracking inside. She took a cautious step forward. He didn't stop her. She wasn't sure what she expected. An outburst? A bitter smile? A single question. Why now? But instead, he just waited. "I thought you were bluffing," she said quietly. The words landed between them like a feather that somehow made a thud. Evan looked at her. Really looked. Not with heat. Not with longing. Not even with sadness. Just stillness. The kind of gaze you give a stranger who seems familiar but doesn't belong to your life anymore. "So did I," he said. A pause. Then, evenly, "until I realized peace was better than being tolerated." She blinked. The sentence split something open behind her ribs. "That's not fair," she said a little too quickly. "I didn't mean to hurt you." His head tilted. Just slightly. "You didn't hurt me," he said gently. Not soft, not harsh, clear. "You freed me." And then he smiled. Not at her. At himself. At the quiet. The warmth of the room. The second life he had built in the absence of someone who once took him for granted. Danielle opened her mouth, some defensive phrase flickering on her tongue. But nothing came, because there was nothing left to argue with. He walked past her, calm as a tide, and opened the door to the porch. The evening air spilled in, cool and fragrant with pine. Laughter drifted in from outside. A dog's tail thumped against the floor, and the woman, his woman, glanced back over her shoulder to check on him. He stepped out without a word. Danielle didn't follow. She stood in the doorway alone, the light behind her casting a long, thin shadow that didn't reach anything. The warmth of the fire didn't touch her now. The seat at the table was never hers to reclaim. The door remained open for a moment, then slowly creaked shut on its own. No slams, no declarations, just closure. And for the first time since this all began, Danielle realized, the worst kind of ending isn't loud. It's when they stop needing you and don't say goodbye.